In this tutorial, I want to show you how to draw the tables and chairs that you see on the screen. So I'm going to be starting with the table that has the 6 chairs and be mindful of the location of the 00 coordinates. I'm going to begin by drawing the lines to represent the overall size of the table, which is 5'4" by 2'8". So I'm going to come back over here. I've already saved the file. Make sure that you save it with the proper file name into the proper location as required by the class. Also, make sure that you started with a template, and the template is the acad.dwt. So I'm just going to show you when you start a drawing file, it has to be the acad.dwt. I've done that already. Make sure you have as well. So I've already saved, and the next thing to do here is to format my units. So I'm going to type units, and for the units, I'll set this to architectural, precision to the nearest 32nd, decimal degrees, and the precision here to the nearest hundredth, so 0.00. You don't need to change anything else. Simply click OK. Personal preference for me is to turn off the grid. You don't need to. You can leave it on. But I'm going to come down here to this icon where it says Display Drawing Grid, and it's currently on. I'm going to click on that. It's going to turn the grid off. And then before I zoom, I'm actually just going to pan so that I can bring the UCS coordinate closer to the middle of the screen. Now, I don't know how close I'm zoomed in, and that's all right, because I'll start by drawing one line first, and then I'll zoom extents. So I'll begin by typing line. And first of all, I'm in a different tab, so let me go back to the Home tab here. I could go to the Home tab, Draw Panel, and click on Line, but I'm simply going to type L, and that's the command alias for line, and I will enter. Please make sure that your coordinates are showing feet and inches. If not, that's a clear sign that you haven't done that yet. So make sure that you stop and then go back and format the units before you continue. So the first point is going to be from 0, 0. So that's what I'm typing in. And then I enter. And then I want to turn ortho on. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to click on this icon where it says ortho mode. You could use your F8 key, but so that you can see what I'm doing on screen, I'm just clicking on the icons. So I'm going to take this up a distance of 5 feet, 4 inches. And that's how I'm going to type it in, 5'4", because it will default to inches, and I'll go ahead and enter. And I see that I'm zoomed in close, so I'm simply going to enter, and that will terminate the command. The next thing I'll do is I will zoom extents. So I'm going to type Z, enter, E, enter. So that will zoom me out so I can see the full line. And then I will use my wheel mouse to zoom out, pan this over a little bit, and I'll continue. The next line I want to draw, I also want it to start at 0, 0. I'm going to type L, enter. And because I have my O snaps turned on, you can see down here, O snap is turned on. And I do have it set to endpoint, midpoint, intersection, and extension. It's going to find the endpoint. So I'm just going to hover. And when I hover, I pause right here. It shows me that it has found the endpoint. All I have to do is click. And then I take my cursor out. I still have ortho on. And I type a value of 2 feet 8 and enter. And if I want to, I can continue. I can bring this straight up. Now, because I have my intersection and extension and all these turned on, but specifically extension, because I have that turned on, this is going to work out real nice. Let me click off of that. I'm still in this mode. And you'll also see that I have tracking turned on. And I'm trying to see if I can show that to you. That's object snap tracking. So that is turned on. Because of that, I am able to take this straight up. I can pause over this endpoint right here for one moment, and then I can track it over. You see how it's tracking it. When I move away from that location, You can see how there's still a plus sign to mark there that's letting me know that it's tracking that point. And then I bring it back and I can go ahead and click, and it has tracked that point and drawn the line, the length to match the other length. And now I can go ahead and click here, and then I can tap the escape key, and I have drawn the general shape of that table. It's always a good idea to pause right now, go to the Home tab, all the way over to the Utilities panel, and right here you click on the measure, and right now it's set to Quick Measure. You can see there's different options there, but this one is set to Quick. So when I click on that, I can then bring my cursor over and I can see that it is 2'8" by 5'4". All four corners are 90 degrees. So I will proceed. I'll tap the escape key. I'll go back to the drawing to see where to go next. So there are 6 chairs, and I want to show you how to draw one and then use your editing commands to generate the others. So the chair, the overall width of the chair is 1'6". The chair is coming out 6 inches from the table, and there's a 2-inch backrest to it. So those are the dimensions. It's also showing over here that the chair is 1'4" away from the edge of the table. So 1'4" is half of 2'8". So that's helpful to know. So I'm going to go ahead and start by drawing this chair here with those dimensions. So I'm going to zoom in and focus right here. I'm panning as well. And I'm going to start to draw. Now I'm going to show you a couple of ways of doing this. The first one, I can go ahead and simply offset some lines. So I'm going to type in O for offset and enter. I'm going to type in the distance to offset. That's going to be 6 inches. So I just type 6 and enter. I'll take this line, select it, and I want to offset it up. So I click on the side to offset. So this is the side. I click, and then I'll select this line, and I'd like to offset it down, but not 6 inches. I want that to be 2 inches. So I'm going to type in 2 and enter. And then I will enter to terminate the command. Now, there is the center point, and I can draw that line, but I'm going to show you later how to do it without drawing the line. But I'll proceed. I'll draw a line, and I'm going to right-click. I'm going to go over here to Recent Input, and I have line there. This is another way of doing it instead of typing or instead of selecting the command. So I click on line here. And because I have midpoint as a running object snap, it's going to find the midpoint, which is here, and then it's going to take it straight up there. And I'll click, and then I can enter to terminate the command. Now, back to the example. It is 1'6" wide. So half of 1'6". I convert this to inches. So 1 foot is 12 inches plus 6 inches. That puts me at 18. Half of 18 is 9. So I'm going to be offsetting 9 inches. So I'll go ahead and type O, enter. And I'll type in 9, enter. And I'll select this line and offset it to the right. I'll select the line again and offset it to the left and enter. I don't need this line anymore, so I select it and I tap my delete key. And then it's a matter of just cleaning this up. So I'll type TR for trim and enter. And then I'll go around and I'll just use my fence option. So I'm going to click here. Notice how it draws that fence. I'll click, and then I'll do the same over here. Click away from the object. It draws the fence. I click, and I'm all done. That's one way to draw it. And I put in the line to help me, and it's okay to do these things. But I want to show you a different way of doing it. So I'll go ahead and just take all of this and delete and start over. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to draw a line, so I'm going to type L, enter. And this time, I'm going to hover over the midpoint like this. And Now I'm going to slowly move my cursor over to the right, and it is tracking, and that's because I have my O track on. And I'm going to type in 9 and enter. So it's tracked that point 9 inches from the midpoints. And then I'm going to take it up this way. I'm going to type 6 and enter. And then I'm going to go across this way. I'm going to type 18 inches because that's 1'6" and enter. And then I'm going to bring it straight down. Now, when I bring it here, notice how it wants to snap to the endpoint. So what I'm going to do is track that endpoint right there, hover for a moment, tells me it's the endpoint, and then slowly bring my cursor over, and it will find that location, that intersection, and I click. And then I will enter to terminate the command. And then I'm going to enter again so that it repeats the last command, which is the line command. And what I'd like to do now is hover over this endpoint, bring that down, and I haven't clicked, I just moved my cursor down, and I'm going to type 2 and enter, and then bring it over, and then I will track this endpoint, hover over it for a moment, and then bring it down. It'll find that intersection and click. And then tap my space bar to terminate the command. So that's how you can draw the chair. Either way is acceptable. There's no right or wrong. There are different ways of doing this in AutoCAD. All right, now I'm going to zoom out. And I do want to continue, but I forgot to round my edges. So let me go back to the example. And it's going to be a 4-inch radius. So I'm going to zoom in here for a moment, like this. And I'm going to use the fillet command to find the location of the icon. Go to the Home tab, Modify Panel, and it's this icon here, Fillet. I'll click on it. When I click on it, it says select the first object, but please look at the command line. There are options there. One of them is the radius option. So type R and enter. Specify the fillet radius, 4 inches. So type 4 and enter. Select the first object. I'll pick this line. Select the second object. I pick this line. And it's already showing me what it's going to look like. So I click. And I'm all done. I'm going to zoom out, and then I need to repeat this command. But I'm going to show you how to do it all at once here. So I'm going to repeat the fillet command, so I'll enter. It is already set to 4 inches if you look at the command line, the radius. And then there's another option, and let me just use my down arrow right now because it's possible. So the down arrow shows me the same options that I see on the command line right here on screen. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to select multiple. So I pick multiple here. And now it's going to remain in the fillet mode until I tell it to stop. So I continue to click on the lines. And then I enter to terminate. So that's how you can get all of them done at once. Now, let me show you another way of doing this, and it might be a little quicker. I'm going to undo everything I just did. So I'm typing U, enter, and I'm back to my 4 corners. And now watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to type J for join. And I believe the join command is in the Home tab, Modify Panel. I need to click on the drop down here. And I believe it's one of these. I don't use it often. There it is. Because I use the keyboard a lot. So here's join. It says it's going to let me join these objects. So I'm going to click on join. And then select my objects, and I'll go ahead and just pick all of them one at a time here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and enter. And now when I hover over one of the lines, notice how it highlights everything, and I have joined them. And because I have joined multiple lines, this is now considered a polyline. Now I will use the fillet command. So I'm going to type F, enter, and it forgot the radius because I undid what I had done earlier. So I need to type R again, and I'm going to type 4 and enter. And this time I am going to select P for polyline. So type P, enter, and then it says select the 2D polyline. So I picked this one here, and notice right away all 4 corners at once. I'll click, now have a rounded corner. It's a polyline, and this is fine. And I will now continue. So another command I need to or would like to introduce is mirror. But before I get to mirror, I also now want to come over here and show you how to use polar tracking. So I'm going to turn on polar tracking. When I do that, watch how ortho is going to turn off because you can only have one on at a time. It's either polar or ortho. So I click on polar, ortho turns off. And then I go to the drop down, which shows me that I have it set to a 45-degree increment for polar tracking. Make sure yours is also set to 45. I'm going to click off of that. Over here, I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to use the mirror command. Mirror command is under the Home tab, Modify Panel. This is mirror. So I'll click on that. And what I'd like to do is I would like to mirror the objects here that represent the chair over to one of the other sides. So I'm going to window them like this. I do not want to select any more objects, so I enter. And then I'm prompted to select my first mirror point or first point of mirror line. I will come over here and it will find the midpoint. And the reason it's finding the midpoint is because I have that as a running object snap. I click on it. And now watch how it is going to mirror, and it's going to lock into that 45-degree angle. Let me pan this up a little bit because it's tracking every 45 degrees. So I can either select here or I can come over to this side and select at this angle. Either one will task. So I'll go ahead and click. I do not want to erase the source object. It's already set to that. So I'm going to enter. It'll default to no. And I now have my chair on the other side. I'm going to pan and zoom out a little bit here. And I'm going to repeat the mirror command. So I'm going to right click and say repeat mirror. I'll select the objects here. Actually, no, I don't want to do that. I want to show you how I did the mirror using polar. So I'll do it this way. I'll go ahead and repeat mirror. I'll enter. I'll select the objects here. Enter. I'll come over to this midpoint. And again, tracking using polar. I can either click at this angle or at this angle. And I'll do that now. I'll click. Erase the source object. No. And I have 3 chairs. Now I'm going to mirror to the opposite side. So I'm going to right click to repeat the mirror command. I'm going to select all of my objects here. Now you notice it doesn't pick the rounded corners or the other line that represents the table because that's part of a polyline now. So I'll go ahead and click. I will enter because I do not want to select any more objects. And then I'll pick the midpoint here and I'll take it over to this midpoint. Or I simply just carry it all the way across and it's going to give me a straight line. So I just click, erase the source objects. I'll simply enter and it's going to take that default setting of no, and I'm all set. That takes care of the table with the 6 chairs, and I will go ahead and save this. So Control S to save. Now I'd like to continue. And I'd like to draw the 4-seat table. And for this one, it's basically just taking this 6-seat table and editing that. So let me continue. And then, of course, rotating it. So I'll go back to the drawing. I'm going to pan over because I want to make a copy of this table and the chairs. And now I'm going to type CO for copy and enter. I'll window all of the items, all of the objects, and enter. And I'm going to copy them from, let's say, this point here over to this point. I'll click and notice how it wants to make more copies, but I don't want to do that. So I'm going to tap the escape key. And then I'm going to pan over and zoom in a little bit more just so I can see this. And you can see that the square table is going to just be cut off right here. So I want to show you a couple of ways of doing this. The first one is a more sophisticated way of doing it. So I'm going to erase. So I'm going to type E, enter, and I'm going to erase the chairs here and enter. Now, I know when going back to the drawing over here, actually I don't need to go back. I'm going to go and measure. You can see that it's 2'8" by 5'4". Well, half of 5'4" is 2'8". So it's a square table. So I'll tap the escape key. And then I'm going to use the stretch command. So stretch is S and enter. Now, if you look at the command line, it says select objects to stretch by crossing window or crossing polygon. You have to make sure that it's a crossing window. But in order to avoid making any mistakes here, I have a habit of typing C so that it forces a crossing window no matter what. So I type C here and enter. And now I can select my objects in any direction. So I'll start here and I'll go right there. Notice crossing window in any direction I go because I type C. I'll enter, or rather I'll click on the screen. There we go. And now I will enter. And then I'll just click somewhere out here and I'll take that straight up and it's going in the direction I want it to. And now I give it a value and I'll type 2'8" and enter. And I'm done. All set. That's what I will refer to as a sophisticated way of doing it. But there are other ways, and I'm going to break this down. So I'm going to undo this twice, 3 times. There we go. And I'll start over. Now, I'll do this. I'm going to erase all 3 chairs like this and enter. And then this table, because it's a polyline, I want to break it back down to its individual objects. So it's selected, and even if it wasn't selected, well, I have it selected. If I type X, X is a command alias for explode. I type X and enter. So the objects that I had selected, that one polyline, has now been exploded back down to its individual parts. So I will now type E, enter, and I'm going to erase the objects right here and enter. Now, if I select, or if I just grip this line here, it's still giving me the endpoint that I want, and I'm going to take advantage of that. So I'm going to tap the escape key, and now I'm going to pan down a little bit, and I'm going to mirror. So I'm going to type MI and enter. And I'd like to mirror all of the objects that are up here. So I'm going to window them like this, and see now it will select the line and the 2 arcs that make up the rounded corners. But I have to make sure not to go any further because it might pick, or it will select those 2 lines, and I don't want that. So I just keep it right here. And I'll go ahead and click and enter. And now for the first point of the mirror line, I will pick this midpoint and then I'll take it across. And it looks like, nope, in my mind, I was thinking that that was the midpoint, but it's not. Let me start over because I thought that's what I wanted to do because I was thinking of the 5'4" table, but I actually need the midpoint of the chair. So I'm glad that I made that mistake here with you. It happens, but it's about correcting it and moving on. So here I go. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more and I'm going to type MI and enter. Now, what's really neat here is that because I had already selected those objects before, it's part of something called a previous selection set. So if I want those previous objects, all I have to do is type P and enter. And again, this is why I'm glad I made that little mistake, and we learn by making mistakes, and it allowed me to introduce that to you. So all I had to do was type P, selects the previous objects, and then I enter. Didn't have to window them. Now I will go ahead and pick from this midpoint, that's the correct one, over to this midpoint and click. Erase the source object, by default no, so I enter. And I now have my table, but the lines are a little too long. And that's okay because I'll type TR and enter. And I'll select this line and this one and enter. And now if I want to, I could go back and type J for join. And I'll select my table and enter. So a couple of ways of doing that. And there is absolutely nothing wrong if you want to draw it from scratch, meaning 2'8" by 2'8", just like we started with this table over here. You can do that as well. Any way is fine. It's all about learning how to use the software. All right, now it's rotated 45 degrees. So I will go ahead and rotate it. I'll use my keyboard. I type RO for rotate and enter. Select the objects. I pick all of the objects here and enter. And specify the base point. Now watch this. Because I've been using O-Track, I want to show you something. I'm going to hover over this midpoint and track it. I'm going to hover over this midpoint and track it. And where they intersect, I go ahead and click. And now I can rotate it. And I believe polar is still on. Yes. So it's going to snap to the 45-degree increment. So I take it and I click and I'm all set. Now, the next thing was to put in that 24-inch radius. We're rounding the corner or rounding the backs on these. So I'll go back to the drawing and I don't need the lines, but I'll delete them in a little bit. And I want to come over here to draw an arc. Now, I need to find the option that gives me a radius. So I'm going to select start and radius. And when I do this, I have to be mindful that arcs are drawn in a counterclockwise direction. So I'm going to click start and radius, counterclockwise. So I want my start point to be here and my end point to be there. And then I bring that out. And as I bring it out, you can see it's starting to create that arc for me. And I'll type in 24 and enter. And I'm all set with that. I can erase. I type E, enter. I can erase this line like that. And then I'm zooming in here, panning. I'm going to copy. So I type CO, enter. And I want to copy this arc. I select it. I enter from this endpoint to that endpoint. And then I tap the escape key. I take this line, just select it, and delete. So I have that arc copied. And then it's just a matter of replicating this on all sides. Now, I could use the mirror command. So I'll erase these two lines and I'll use a crossing window like this and enter. And I can type MI, enter. And I'll use a crossing window over here like this, enter. I'll go from this midpoint here and I'll take it straight down and click and enter. It's one way to do it. the other way. And of course, I could repeat the same to get the arcs on the other two chairs. But to continue practicing some commands, I'm actually going to erase all of this. So I take these two lines and this one and this one. Also going to erase. I'll type E, enter. I want to pick the lines here. I use a crossing window like this. And then I want to erase. I'll type E, enter. I'll erase these two and this one and this one and enter. And now I will use my polar array. So I click on array and I select polar and I select the objects. Now remember, this is a polyline. So it doesn't matter when I create my window like this to select the object, it's not going to pick that. So I can go ahead and click. It has selected that. I enter. It wants to know the specify, or it wants me to specify the start point of the array. Now it's right here in the middle. And I used O track the last time. So I tracked this midpoint down and then I tracked that midpoint. But it's not going to work here because I'm at a 45-degree angle. What I could do is I could track this midpoint over and this midpoint over and down, and it'll find it. But I want to show you something that's really neat. I'm going to use Shift, right click, and I'm going to select Geometric Center. I'm going to click on that, and it will find the geometric center of my polyline. And I click, it finds it, starts the array. I do not want 6 items. I want 4 items. So I type 4 and enter. And I have my array. Now this time I will turn off associative just because. I've used associative before. You see what the results are there. What happens if I do not set it to associative? It's off. I'll close the array. And I'm all done. And when I hover, you see how they're all still individual objects. They don't become part of one array. So that's another way of doing it. My goal here is just to show you options. Now, back I go here, and I would like to now draw this table and the chairs. And the table has a 1'6" radius, and the chairs have an 8" radius. So I'll start here, and I'll pan down, and I'll draw a circle. I'll type C and enter, and I'll start at this location. I'll take it out. I want a radius of 1'6", so I type 1'6", enter. There we go. I'll zoom in, and now I want to draw the first chair, or I'll call it a stool, around this round table. So I'll type circle. Actually, I don't need to type it. I can right click and repeat circle. And I want to start this circle right here at the quadrant point. But because quadrant is not a running object snap, just like geometric center wasn't, I use shift right click and I select the quadrant point. Quadrant point here, I click on it, I take it up or out, doesn't matter, and I want a radius of 8. So I type 8 and enter. Now, before I use my polar array, I'm going to trim. So I'm going to type TR, enter, and I'm going to trim this portion of the circle, and then I enter. Then I'll proceed to use the array command, but I want to make sure I'm going to have the right number of stools. Just want to double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Now I'll come up to my array command, click on the drop down, select polar, select the object, enter, specify the center point, shift right click to select the center because I don't have it as a running object snap. So I click on that. It will find the center of that circle, which is what I want. So I click, and it gives me a total of 6 objects. And I want to change that to 5 and enter. And I'll leave it as associative this time, and I'll close the array. And now you can see with it being associative, it acts as one single set of objects. It's an array. And then if I wanted to, I can come back here, change it from 5 to 4 or another value. So that's the nice thing about keeping it associative. But I'll close the array and then zoom extend. So Z enter, E enter. And those are my tables and my chairs. Make sure you save your file. And then what I like to do is I like to zoom extents, Z enter, E enter, before I exit the file. That way, when I come back to the file or I look the file up in my list of drawings, it's going to show me a preview. And it will show me this preview here so I can see everything that I've drawn. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks.